And I've needed to learn to give myself grace, that I'm not perfect because I'm kind of a perfectionist at heart, and to be okay with that, to give grace to my learner because she's not always going to be where she needs, where I think, and we're not always going to match. Like, I'm going to be ready to go and she's going to be like, yeah, no.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. This episode of Homeschool Talks features a conversation originally hosted live on our Facebook page. So if you like what you hear, be sure to follow us there for more content like this. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Vicki Bentley. I'm an educational consultant and team leader for HSLDA, and joining me today, we have Cheri Kay Sessions. Cheri Kay is a homeschool mom, and she is one of our special needs consultants. She's also a teammate of mine on our pre-K to 8th grade educational consultants team, so we get to talk to each other pretty much every day. And today, we are going to hear Cheri Kay's very inspiring story of homeschooling her 3 amazing kiddos. Her kids were all adopted internationally, and she's got a variety of unique needs within her family. So we're going to get to know a little bit more about Cheri Kay, her journey into homeschooling. She has had to learn a lot of different skills. She didn't come equipped with these to begin with, and there were things that she had to learn as she went along to accommodate her kids' special needs. So thank you again for joining us today. I know you've had an interesting weekend with some illnesses and visits to the ER and things like that. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us. And so I just want to ask you can you give us a little bit of background on like who is Cheri Kay? Who are you, and how did you get started homeschooling? I mean, if I remember correctly, parenting wasn't even on your radar. So tell us a little bit about how you got started. First of all, we'll go with the adoption part. What inspired you to adopt as a single woman?
So as a little girl, I always knew I wanted to adopt. There was never a question there. I don't know why. I didn't know anybody that was adopted, but it's always been in my heart that I've wanted to adopt. I thought it would be a little more normal that, I would go to school, get married, have a job, plan this out. God had a different idea for me. I went to Haiti to do physical therapy in an orphanage as I was finishing up my doctoral studies in physical therapy. And I met 2 children that I knew were mine. And so I fought it a little bit. I was like, who does this? Like there's a plan here. But so during that 10-day stay in Haiti, I decided that I was going to adopt the 2 children that eventually became my 2 oldest. So it wasn't a plan to be a single adoptive mom, but it was a great learning experience for me, and I would never change it.
Well, when you brought them home, now how old were they when you first adopted? Were they babies?
So
there's a little bit of an
age
gap, right?
Babies.
Okay.
Yep, I met them when they were babies, but the adoption process took 4.5 years.
Oh my.
I moved to Haiti for 3 of those years. I lived in Haiti, lived with missionaries, did some mission work in Haiti while I was completing the adoption. So when we finally came home, my son was 4.5 and my daughter was 6. So they were not little by then. They were not babies.
Right. Sure. So now you're bringing them home at this age. They're pretty much school age or almost school age at this point. So did you start off homeschooling? Was homeschooling on your radar?
Homeschool was never on my radar. My daughter is profoundly deaf, uses ASL, and also has some cognitive difficulties. And I, at that time, was a new signer, learning to sign because she was deaf. In my mind, there was no way I could homeschool her. How would I didn't have the language to do that. I didn't have the skills to do that. So I put her in a public charter school at the time. And it was a deaf and hard of hearing program. So the teachers were deaf. The other students were deaf. And then they also had a hearing classroom for siblings. So I put my son in that one so that he was also continually exposed to ASL and other deaf kids. So I worked. I was a single mom. I'm working. My kids were in school. That seemed like natural, right? Like I go to work, they go to school, and that's how this will go.
That's the model, right? So were there any particular challenges that you encountered with the special needs services that you were getting in the school system? I mean, did that meet your expectations?
There were tons of challenges. Even with my son who doesn't have special needs, English was his third language.
Oh my.
Because he spoke Haitian Creole because they're from Haiti. He was signing with his sister and then English. So I had a very difficult time getting teachers to understand that he wasn't not complying. He didn't understand their words. So we had a lot of struggles with the public school understanding who he was and his language difficulties at the kindergarten level. And then as far as special education goes, my daughter has a laundry list of needs, and it was a struggle to get any of them met. Throughout the years, we ended up moving back to Michigan from California, where I was when they came home. We had struggles. She was being sent home because of behavior. We had struggles because they would say things like, well, if she could get her behavior under control, then we could teach her. Or they would have programs and activities and there wouldn't be interpreters. Or they would send home work that was write down the sounds of these letters or which letter makes this sound. And I'm like, this is not matching. My kid can't hear. And so it was a struggle, and it was a constant, this meeting after that meeting, this meeting, constant struggles. She wasn't progressing. I kept begging for more and more and more. And eventually they told me she was in 6th grade. So I'd done this, I'd battled for a long time. And they eventually told me that she was a waste of time to teach to read because she wasn't progressing. So it was a waste of time. And they would not put a reading goal on her IEP. That was when I chose to homeschool.
Yeah. So how did you get involved? I mean, what was your introduction? Had you seen other people who homeschooled? Had you been reading about it? What put it on your radar?
Yeah. So my aunt was a homeschooler. Okay. So I had watched my cousins be homeschooled. Never really thought about it. I had not done any research. I didn't really know how I was going to do this. I did look up the Michigan laws, though. I did do that. And okay. I also signed up for HSLDA.
Yes, yay.
So those were the first two things I did.
Everybody's first steps, do some research and sign up for HSLDA.
That's right. Those were the first two things I did. And then I was taking her to an educational therapist at the time, and she kind of helped guide me through what we would need to do. So
Gotcha.
I did have a little bit of guidance through this educational therapist. So I just decided right then that I knew that it didn't matter what I didn't know, I could figure it out. Right. And we would make this work.
So did you decide to pull both of them out at the same time, or was this, let's work with her and see what happens and then we'll see about him, or how did that work out?
So by that time, we had found a theater arts charter school for him. And my son is an actor, loves theater. And by that time, he was thriving in a charter school for the theater arts. And so I left him in school. He was doing much better with that inspiration of learning through theater. So he stayed in school at that charter school. And by that time, I had brought home my third child also, she is also profoundly deaf. And she, at that time, was going to the deaf and hard of hearing preschool. And I went ahead and left her in preschool while I kind of figured out everything with my oldest.
Sure.
At kindergarten, I brought my little one home. And she's been homeschooled since kindergarten. Okay. But she did go to preschool in a DHH program while I was kind of getting my feet wet with this whole
Yeah.
homeschooling thing.
So you also are foster parent of a medically fragile child, right?
I am.
So I know we can't go into a lot of details, but I know I was a foster parent for over 20 years myself. So I know that's a huge investment of time. It's a spiritual commitment. It's an emotional commitment. So how does foster care play into your advocacy for kids with special challenges? Because you've got a younger one now with special challenges medically in particular. So you're advocating for her. What correlation do you see there? I mean, does your past experience with your older kids help you in your advocacy with your younger ones, or how does that work out for you?
It does. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned about myself through adopting and raising, my oldest is now 19, raising her and learning how to advocate for her. I've always known that I'm energetic and have a little spunk and all that, but I never really knew that would what that was for. Like, I didn't know why God gave me that skill until I got my girl.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, this is so that I am not afraid to stand up and do what she needs and be that voice when she can't be. And so I'm not really afraid to do that. And I think with my current foster placement, she needs someone like that. She has a situation medically in which it doesn't look like the rest of us. So when we went into the ER this weekend, I had to continually remind the medical personnel, nope, that number is normal for her.
Right.
Because they wanted to keep adjusting it to be normal. And I'm like, but that's normal for her and you can't change that. And so, and then they're like, oh, yeah. And so it's one of those things that I've learned to be confident enough to be able to say to doctors who are, I'm supposed to follow their recommendations and stuff like that, but having that confidence to say, nope, it's not appropriate for this child.
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of learning.
Yeah. The mom instincts, and then the spunk, like you said, you've got to be able to speak up for what you're thinking. So good for you. So, tell me a little bit about how those of us who may not be in those circumstances, who may not have children with maybe the profound special needs or the single parents, how can we help those families around us who are meeting those challenges? I mean, what would you say would speak love and support to a single homeschool mom on those tough days, especially someone with special needs kiddos?
Yeah. Special needs moms, whether they're homeschooling or not, but especially if they're homeschooling, I think people think that we need a break from our kids. And so I often have people say, oh, I'll take them to the park, or I'll take them to the museum, and you can clean, or you can get this done or that done. And truly, I want to do those things with my kids. I know I'm with my kids all day, but I'm wearing 2 or 3 or 4 hats while I'm with my kids. And so, like, what I would love is if somebody took one of those jobs for me, like the dishes or mowing the lawn or whatever, and let me go make memories with my kids, not wearing 5 hats. And I think people miss that. I think they think we want a break.
Yeah, right.
But we also want to connect with our kids when we're not wearing 5 hats. Because as a single mom, we're often working and cleaning and cooking and playing doctor and homeschooling and doing all the things, and having the opportunity to be mom for a minute is energizing. Not that a moment without our kids isn't bad, but we don't want to miss out on those fun
that's
things
any
either.
mom, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. But I don't want every time I get a break is when my kids get to go do something fun and I'm not making.
You get to do chores. Right.
Yeah. Because I want them to have memories of me doing fun things, not only that mom always worked.
Well, that's really helpful. I think that's great for us to recognize and to be able to look for those opportunities. So tell us a little bit more about what kind of accommodations, if you're a homeschooling parent, what kind of accommodations are reasonable? I know when sometimes our parents of special needs kiddos are concerned that they may be lowering a standard or something along those lines. But what's reasonable accommodations that's still meeting the child's needs? And how does that play into maybe an SEP or what we would have considered an IEP in the public school system? Tell us a little bit about how your homeschooling plan played out with your kiddos.
Yeah. So the first thing I did was got the SEP form from HSLDA and made one. It's important to have those things in place, written down. I know I had tried a few things with my daughter, whether it was, that she had like a Swiss ball or a big exercise ball to sit on to try to help her focus. And that didn't work. So now I note that on my SEP so that we don't recreate the wheel later if we need, I'm like, what did I do and how, So, but in the home, it's so nice because I always make sure that everything is presented with ASL and closed captioning. I'm able to make sure she understands it. I can use videos, YouTube. There are quite a few ASL accessible stories online. And we just use those and incorporate those into everything. So like with science, we're doing science, learning about the clouds, and then there's a story about the clouds, and it's all in ASL, and it's all at her level. And I can take breaks when she needs to. And I get to read her and respond to what she needs. Even if she's learning while she's eating lunch, because she likes to watch videos and eat. So that's her ASL story time. And so,
got a captive audience there. So yeah.
That's right.
So where are you finding these resources? For our parents who are interested in some of these things, where would they start looking for these resources?
Yeah. Well, you can contact us at HSLDA. I have an entire list of them all ready to go that I can send, and it's accessible to all of our consultants. Gallaudet University is the nation's biggest deaf college, and it's in Washington, D.C. And you can find almost anything on their website. You can find reading support. You can find ASL standards to test your kids' ASL levels.
So now these things that you're mentioning, are these things that somebody would maybe want to keep track of on their SEP to show that they have or their portfolio to show what steps they've taken, what therapies they've tried and things like that?
Yep, absolutely. You can keep track of them there. You can keep track of, at the bottom of my SEP, I list my resources that I've used or the curriculum that I've used, so that I can always find it. But there are other things like extramath.com has different languages to explain what the next thing is that's happening. And they have an ASL one. So my daughter does extra math as like math fluency practice, and there's an ASL version for her, which is super fun when she gets to see somebody sign.
Yeah.
And there's a couple
language. Literally.
Yeah. It's just not everywhere.
Yeah.
There's a couple of reading curriculums out there and spelling curriculums that are developed for the deaf and hard of hearing. So there are resources out there.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back for some of our folks who may be a little bit newer here. We've used the term SEP, but most of our families are probably familiar with the term IEP. So can you tell them the difference in an SEP and an IEP? Why are we using that terminology?
So an IEP is a legal document that is developed by the public school system for kids with disabilities, special needs, or learning challenges who are not on grade level. The SEP is kind of a homeschool equivalent, and we have that template here at HSLDA that can be utilized. It's not a legal document. There are not guidelines. There are not timelines. Nobody has to sign it. You don't have to submit it, but it's set up in a similar fashion. It gathers the same data and information, and it helps guide the homeschooling mom through the teaching, just like it does the public school teacher. But they don't have to, it's not required. There's no stress around it. There's no meeting, sitting down with the principal and the superintendent and fighting for what you want for your kid. You get to decide what your kid wants and give it to them.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I think we're going to pop a little bit of information about that into our chat. So if anybody's looking for that information on SEPs, IEPs, how to do an SEP from a homeschooling perspective, we've got that for you. One of the comments has come up too about a lot of times the school websites will let you know what the requirements are to homeschool. So that can play into your SEP as well. I do encourage people though to check the HSLDA website for what the requirements are for homeschooling in your area, because sometimes it's possible that your local community school's website may not quite share the requirements in the same way we would at HSLDA. We want to make sure that nobody's asking you for any information that you aren't required to be giving, or that there's not anything that you need to know that might be missing from there. So do check our HSLDA website under the legal section. So just wanted to pop that in there as well.
Yeah.
Cheri Kay, we've talked a little bit about accommodations parents can give in general, but for you, it was sign language. So when you met these babies, you were not versed in sign language at this point in ASL. This was something that you decided you needed to be investigating because you knew that need was coming up. So do you have any tricks for us, or tips? I say tips or tricks for learning ASL as a homeschooler? I mean, are any particular programs that were helpful for you?
So there are lots of programs online now. Back when my big girl was little, there wasn't as much, but there are a lot more now. A lot of community colleges will have ASL classes.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple online programs. That's what I did. I was living in Haiti, so I didn't have the same supports as, parents here might have with learning ASL and having classes to go to. So I used an online program myself. It's called signingonline.com. It's very straightforward. Whenever I had internet, I would get on. I didn't always have internet in Haiti. So that's how I learned. There are online dictionaries, which are great for learning new vocabulary. I found once I had quite a bit of vocabulary, I needed some help with grammar and structure of the language. And so I actually took a couple of courses at the community college to help with that. Finding the deaf community and hanging out with other deaf people, chatting with them. They're a great community. They'll welcome you in. It's a great community of people. So, using language in a natural way, immersed with other deaf people is your best way. And we do a lot of deaf events where we go to the museum with the group of deaf people, or to the park, or go watch a play and have a sign language interpreter there. For myself, I have a couple of friends who are sign language interpreters that if I get stuck with something, I'll say, hey, quick question. Can you help me with this? I had to do it yesterday. I didn't know how to sign something. And I was like, can you show me the sign for? And she sent me back usually a video telling me, yep, this is what it is. Oh, gosh, that's so much clearer than what I was trying to do.
Because
so I have a couple of.
Am I correct in thinking that ASL is not a word for word or sentence for sentence translation? It's more like a thought. It's conveying the thoughts. And so it's not a matter of, well, what's this word and how do I put it in the sentence? So when you're talking about grammar and phrasing and things like that, that's the reason behind that, because it's not just how do I change these words to another word, right?
Right. ASL is its own language. It has grammar rules and syntax rules, and it's its own fully formed language. So it's just like you don't translate Spanish to English word for word. It's the same with ASL.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Well, that took a lot of commitment for you to do that. I just applaud you. So we've talked about some of the resources that are available to the deaf community. Let's just talk in general about single parenting, special needs parenting. I mean, and when you've got both of those in one package there, what encouragement would you give to parents, moms in particular, but parents who are single and homeschooling special needs kiddos?
yeah. Can I just add one more thing really quick to the
Sure,
last thing we were
sure.
talking
Yeah,
about, and then I'll answer that
yeah.
because I missed it. When we talked about resources for families who are
Mhm.
using ASL, I want to also say that I said HSLDA, but for deaf parents who are educating their children, if they want to call in and speak to an educational consultant, we have set it up so that I can talk face to face with them with Zoom and sign
Mhm.
so that they can get clearer communication. So that's another resource where they can get questions answered speaking with a signer. Um, so I wanted to make sure that those parents out there who are deaf, who are homeschooling their either deaf children or hearing
For
children,
hearing children.
we can still help support that here at HSLDA and help them get what they need and their questions answered as well.
And that's an amazing resource. We really appreciate you and all that you do. So, and I know before we get to that last question, I do want to just touch bases on a couple of questions that came in because they're related to that. Somebody asked about material, curriculum for those using ASL. And I'm assuming this question, Tony, you may want to clarify that we're not talking about teaching ASL, but teaching your other subjects. How do you adapt what you're using, or are there materials that are specifically done in ASL for teaching the academic subjects?
Yeah. So most of the curriculum that's out there is focused on reading. So there's reading milestones, there's bedrock reading, there's Fairview, which is a reading supplemental program, and that has videos with ASL. It works on multiple meaning words. There is also a spelling program that Gallaudet just released recently. Well, it's not Gallaudet itself, but it's through Gallaudet as well. But it's called Finger Spelling Your Way to Reading. So most of the ASL specific resources are geared towards reading. The other subjects, there are a couple of websites, ASL STEM, that focus on science and math words and concepts. So there are a couple of websites that can focus on those two subjects, but they're not curriculum.
Okay.
But they can help you explain concepts and gain vocabulary. The other subjects outside of reading, there aren't any deaf or ASL specific curriculum. They have to be adapted. So one of my biggest struggles is I could never use an online curriculum for my daughter because she can't follow the directions that are coming at her. So, we have to have sort of your traditional book and paper, and then I have to present it in ASL. And a lot of times I'll get help with that. Like if I, like the other day, what was it? There was some concept. I was like, I'm not exactly sure how to do that. So I Googled it and I found a few videos. ASL Pro has some videos that are good at explaining different concepts. And so I'll just look around the resources that I have. Texas School for the Deaf has a lot of ASL stories, and sometimes those will explain the concepts that I want to explain. And I use those to help me convey what I need to, or I say, okay, I need to get an interpreter to help me. So, I think if I was going to give an advice to a homeschooling mom who's using ASL to teach their deaf kid, is to find someone who will support you in that language, where you can say, can you help me explain this more clear? I think I'm explaining it right, but my kid is looking at me like I have 10 heads. Clearly I have something wrong. So, having a support system of another signer,
be
is
helpful.
important. And I have a few different friends that I can call and say, how would you explain this in ASL? What do you use for this sign? Because like in English, there are different signs for different words. Like some of us say pop, some of us say soda. Neither one of us are wrong. I mean, I guess you could get in the argument, but
Yeah.
neither one of us are wrong, but it's the same
It's
in
just,
sign. There are different ways
yeah,
to sign things, and maybe I'm missing something there.
gotcha.
So
Different nuances
that
there.
finding a couple other people to support you, even if they're far away, with Facebook and the messaging and the video on Facebook or Zoom or all of the technology where FaceTime, where we can see each other, we can really do a lot more of supporting each other with ASL than we could in the past. So
This
that
sounds
would
like
be encouraging.
amazing resources. I know we've got some
Yeah.
parents who are interested in knowing a little bit more about teaching their children ASL, whether they're hearing impaired or not. So I think we've got some resources listed. So those of you who have asked those questions, please go ahead and check the chat. I think Cheri Kay may have mentioned a few things early on that you may want to go back and listen to if you missed the beginning of that, and you can catch those resources as well. So those are super resources. So I just want to again come back to the encouragement for the single moms and what if you could talk to somebody, if you could talk to your 22 or 24-year-old self, what would you say? What would you share?
So it's taken a while for me to honestly, people have asked me that question, and it's taken me a while to actually figure out what it is. And truly, it's the word grace. And I've needed to learn to give myself grace, that I'm not perfect because I'm kind of a perfectionist at heart, and to be okay with that, to give grace to my learner because she's not always going to be where she needs, where I think, and we're not always going to match. Like I'm going to be ready to go and she's going to be like, yeah, no. I need to give grace to my house because there are days that it's going to look like a tornado through here, and that's okay. There are days I need to give grace to the curriculum and be like, yeah, you're a little strict today. We're not doing all that. So to be able to let go of that perfectionism and give grace to all areas of our lives and be able to say, you know what, I'm going to be able to do this today, but I'm going to let that go. And that's okay. We'll come back to that tomorrow. I think single moms have a lot on their plate. They're wearing a lot of hats. They're doing a lot of things, and we want to do it all to the best of our ability.
Sure.
And sometimes we just have to say, that one's okay today. So if you come to my house today and I'm sitting in here, please know that my living room is a hot mess. I'll clean it up after the kids go to bed.
Well, I think that's a great word for any homeschooling parent, but especially for parents who may feel that there's an extra spotlight on them to be doing this exceptionally well. So I really appreciate that. So is there anything else that you would like to share with us today, Cheri Kay, that just jumps out at you?
I made a couple notes.
I know some of these other questions came up. And so was there anything that you thought of that maybe we didn't cover?
One question is how do I help when I don't know ASL myself? There are programs out there to learn ASL. And there are some that are great for the mom and the child to learn together. Even things simple, if the child is hearing, signing time, they often like that for the younger kids. So just taking it step by step and following your routine. The best way to learn the language and make it functional for your family is to learn words that you use. So sometimes taking a class, you're learning things that maybe your kid's not really using, but to get on and use those dictionaries and look up the words. I'll often tell moms, keep a piece of paper on your refrigerator. And when there's a word that you want your kid to know and you don't know it, but they're saying cookie all day long or trying to get a cookie, but they can't say it or they can't sign it, write that down. When you have a minute, go look it up. And now cookie is functional. You can use cookie and bath or, the things that you use throughout the day. You might not, a lot of ASL classes start with family members, and you're like learning mom, dad, uncle, cousin. Well, how often do you say the word cousin
Right.
in your daily? You don't. So try to make a list of those words that matter for your learner. And then you're going to see them start to pick it up, and you're going to see them be able to make those gains, and then you're going to build quicker. So
I think that's true of pretty much any foreign language, especially with younger kids. I know I was talking to a developer of a foreign language program. She had tried to, it's TalkBox Mom. She had originally been trying to learn a foreign language herself, and she could never get the practice in because she had life going on around her. Her kids would be wanting her for this and wanting her for that. And so she decided they would just do it together. And, but she determined that most of the dialogue that she was learning were, as you mentioned, things she was never, I remember learning, foreign language in high school or junior high school. And we learned things like, get up, don't sit in the snow. Well, like I lived in Southern Virginia. It didn't snow. There were all things like that. And so she developed her program using things like, whose turn is it to empty the dishwasher and put the game away and, make your bed, the things that we use in our everyday life. So that's such a good point that we just need to make it relevant and valid for what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Cheri Kay. I get to see you and talk to you all the time. So I love getting to see your cheerful face and hear that spunkiness. So I appreciate that. I just want to let our readers or our listeners know, viewers know as well, that if they're HSLDA members, they are welcome to call in and chat with you. If they have questions about some of the things we've talked about, have special needs kiddos, if, as you've mentioned, if anybody happens to be a hearing impaired parent and wants to know more about the resources that they can find to help their child, that you are available to talk to them. So just want our parents to know that we have created at HSLDA lots of resources to help you meet those special needs in lots of different areas. And we're blessed to have Cheri Kay on staff to assist the ASL homeschool community, as well as homeschool families in general, because you work with not just special needs, but you're actually crossover departments and work in pre-K to 8th as well. So y'all can find a lot more information in the comments here. And if you are not already an HSLDA member, we would love for you to join us. So check our website at hslda.org/join. And thanks again, Cheri Kay, for joining us. And we hope you all have a great day.
Bye.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's team of educational consultants. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the number of curriculum options to choose from? Or maybe you're frustrated because your child is struggling and you're not sure what to do next. Our educational consultants can help. As an HSLDA member, you have access to customized, practical guidance on everything from lesson planning and record keeping to helping a child with learning difficulties. If you want to experience less frustration and more progress in your homeschool, get support from our educational consultants by becoming a member of HSLDA. Learn more at hslda.org/join. That's hslda.org/join. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.